I'm Marjorie Willis. I now live in Milton, Florida, which is near Pensacola, Florida. Previous to moving 20 years ago, I was in Stanfordville, and we were in the old Quaker meeting building on Church Lane. That's where we came to live in 1948, July, I believe it was.
All right, I'll tell her who I am. I'm Nancy Willis, Marge's daughter. I was born in 1951 here in Stanfordville, actually Sharon Hospital. And I live now on 47 Church Lane, right next to the church that Mom's talking about. So I'm right next to where I grew up. That wasn't actually a Quaker church. The Quakers split from the building down behind where Elvin's used to be and moved up to probably an Episcopal church or some other denomination. So
Evelyn Wheeler's house.
that was it. I know, but that's now you can tell when you came in 1948 about started in Poughkeepsie and then
Right, it was in July. I was married in 1947 in Virginia, where I met my husband during the World War II, and we moved up to Poughkeepsie. That was when was I married?
you were married August.
August 23rd, yeah. We came up to Poughkeepsie, and I got a job at Up to Date. I also worked at Mid-Hudson Chevrolet, and my husband went to work at IBM in 1948. Prior to that, when I was working and we first moved to Poughkeepsie, he went back to school on a veterans type of thing to get his high school diploma, because he hadn't graduated from high school prior to going into the Navy. And we did. We moved to Stanfordville in this old Quaker building.
Mom, it wasn't Quaker though. Everybody calls it the Quaker church, but it's not Quaker.
No, it's a meeting. They call it a meeting house.
It's not a Quaker church though. It had a chandelier. And so when Mom and Dad moved there, it was a church that had stained glass windows and a chandelier and that wainscoting inside.
It was all one big room. It wasn't divided.
But it wasn't a Quaker church. I don't know. It'd be interesting to find out what kind of church it was. But tell them about the chandelier. They didn't have much money. So
I think it was Halloween night.
October probably of 1948.
And the antique shop, Mary Henry, called Trash and Treasures. You've heard of that probably, on 82. Bob and I, we needed money. We didn't have much money at that time. We took that old chandelier down, unfortunately. I think it had candles in it. What's that one? We took it up to Mary Henry's. We got $25 for it. We walked up there with it. That was quite an experience.
Yeah, Mary Henry was right over there behind the Mexican restaurant in that red barn, and she had 2 stories, but she used to take things and sell them. We used to get our ice skates there. If we needed new ice skates, we'd go up to her shop and get our ice skates. But let's see now. She said you heated with a kerosene heater, and I think a lot of people heated with coal at that time, and there was a...
It had no insulation. It was so cold there. Sometimes I wonder how we lived
there. Well, that
there.
first winter, my brother was born in 49,
Yeah.
so they did come after August, and it was my grandparents that found it, the church for sale, for $1,500. And my grandfather fronted the money for them, and they paid him back a little each week, but their salaries were $20 a week. Or my father probably made $30 a week at IBM. And they used to travel to Poughkeepsie at that point when he got the job at IBM and pick up a lady. What was her name? Okay, you told me this morning.
It's okay. They wouldn't know who she was.
No, but her name was Netta Thompson, and she lived in Millbrook. But before that, my father met Fred Marin, and he had a farm just outside of Bengal. Before you get to the Hunts Lake Creek, a house and a barn behind, and they were older, a little bit older, but he gave my father a job driving some fish, like shrimp and fish around
The cell, yeah.
Yep.
Hmm.
And you were at home then, or were you?
No, I was always at home. I never went to work, yeah.
Well, you went to work in Poughkeepsie with Dad, you said.
Oh, yeah, at that time before you were
Right.
born, Bobby was born.
Well, when she arrived in Stanfordville, kind of the first day or second day, the minister was sitting on her porch from the Congregational Christian Church.
Reverend English.
English, yep. And he saw a new family moving in, or a couple, and he thought he'd introduce himself, but he was a little too forceful for Mom, so she ended up going to the Methodist church. And
The church second, I don't want to hear that.
yeah, no, but she went to the Methodist church first, and that's where
And I loved both of them. They were
well,
nice churches.
I started there. And my father was the superintendent of Sunday schools at the Methodist church. And I remember a minister named Mr. Scheibel. I don't know, it's Shibel. And he had a daughter. And we used to go to Sunday school. Do you know the Methodist church? And across the street was the rectory.
Yeah.
And in the basement of the rectory, we had pictures of like having meals down there, like get-togethers. And Dot Burdick, I remember, and Mark Burdick, I think they were up there. Were they up there at that Methodist church? We just have
No, I
pictures.
think they were always.
I don't know. We have pictures of ourselves in that basement. There was kind of these lolly columns that held it up. And my father was instrumental in building the new addition on that back of the church, a Sunday school room or something to get us out of the basement. And then they left that church, and then they came here to the Congregational Christian. And we all went to Sunday school and were involved. But the church was a very community place where they brought families and older people together that got to know each other.
And I used to sing in the choir at Bangor Church and the other church, so that was a nice thing to do. I enjoyed that.
But who was in the choir with you? Do you remember anybody?
No, not really.
Mrs. Battistoni.
We had Christmas music and
Yeah,
Easter.
but people they want to know.
Yeah.
Any people?
I don't recall.
Yeah. Did you know the Battistonis? John Battistoni's mother and father? Kathleen.
Mhm.
Yeah, my mother hired her to drive us when we were real little because we would have to walk from our house
No school bus.
on Church Lane to this school. So,
Mhm.
like kindergarten, first grade, she used to pick us up, my brother and Sissy Corey. And actually, there was a diner at the bottom of the hill. I'm telling all the stories. And we would go down, and we were able to go down, and they crossed us on the highway. We had lunch down there sometimes. So, let's see. Now, what else did you...
Well, we're going to get back to the first year we moved there, what I remember in the town.
Right.
Okay.
That's Mr.
You-
Haight.
You would like to know that?
Yep, Mr. Haight.
Okay, 1948. In June is when we moved into the church building. And we almost had to rebuild it. It was just absolutely, it didn't have any insulation. It was so cold, and we only had a water pump. We had to go elsewhere to get water to drink. You couldn't drink that water. And actually, my husband did a lot of making the rooms and things. We didn't have the money to hire people, but eventually things got better. Let's see. I'm telling you what I remember when we came into town.
Yeah, when Mr. Haight came to your house.
Yeah,
That's
we
good.
walked down Church Lane. Byron Haight lived in a house next to Rock Place in Church Lane, and he had a barn where he had a cow. And he came and knocked at my door one day or one evening and said, "Do you think you could come and take care of my missus for a few hours a day?" He said, your pay will be $10 a week and a quart of milk. Oh, I said, that's fine. I'd love to come down and help you out. I didn't have my children then, yeah. So I used to go and help him. And then
What was his wife's name?
Ella May, I think, yeah.
And they were old.
Yeah.
They were old.
Yeah. And then I remember where the post office was a little bit further. You walk up Church Lane, go across Bull's Head Road, and Divine's store was there. And he had everything. Shoes and clothing and all kinds of things, mostly for men, I think. And the post office was in the same building over on the left of that building. And they had this Franklin stove that they put, I guess they heated it with wood. And there was always people sitting around it talking, you know, the people some of the gentlemen in the town mostly. And I think the postmaster was Newt Post.
Yeah, Mr. Post.
Newt Post, yeah,
Bobby Post's father.
yeah.
He smoked a pipe. But anyway, Bauer's store was there. George Bauer.
Elvin's.
No,
yeah.
George
Oh,
Bauer.
that's right.
He was the butcher. And there was another guy named Ford Friday. And that was right behind Home Plate, that apartment house now.
Oh, and when we walked down the street there, Ford Friday was a butcher. He had a butchering thing, but we used to see the cats get up on the butcher table. So I never got meat there, but anyhow. He was a dear old man. He reminds me of Mahatma Gandhi.
Well, he had a lot of animals.
Yeah.
He had a couple of raccoons tied up there. We used to take them grapes, and they had a dirty dish of water, and the raccoons used to wash the grapes, and they eat them with their little
And he
paws.
had a fox and a milk can across the street behind Home Plate.
So that was later, that Mr. Bonagora, he lived in the house that is actually the Quaker church, and that's behind. It's for sale now if you guys want to walk in there. I'd like to do that myself, see what it looks like. There was an apartment and a lady lived there, Katie Irish, Mrs.
I remember.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, it was the woman. She was
Yeah.
alone there and she lived there. Carrie Irish. And yeah, you know, the post office was behind. There was like these post office boxes.
We were talking about the disposal areas. I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
first dump was over by the town barn that we know of,
Right near
right where the new place is built. Because when they dug the foundation for that new building, there was a lot of trash there. And then Battistoni's restaurant, there was a dump all the way back there. That road that goes where Hortons used to live.
in front of Battistoni's, the road just goes, it's a dead end, I think, isn't it?
I don't know, but there was a dump back there. We were remembering where the town dumps were. And then the new dump, who did you say
Supervisor John Battistoni, Senior.
bought that land and established the new dump there? And it was a landfill at first.
I don't know, he was looking for land
Well,
and that
they
was
buried
perfect.
the garbage
Yeah.
first, and then they had to reclaim it and put the top over it. Now they have a transfer station there now. But
Yeah.
there was a little ski area there. Do you remember that?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
A little rope tow and a little ski area.
You've been skiing there?
No, but I've been there for other reasons.
Okay.
And the Stanfordville wreck, I don't know when that started, but the kids, we used to swim in the creek.
Yeah.
They put a dam and there was a swimming hole in the creek, where the creek came around. And it's all, you know, gone now, but they built a new.
It's wonderful to have that recreation area. It's beautiful. And the tennis courts. I know I took tennis lessons from one of the stats,
Lucille.
Lucille, yeah. And I enjoyed that. Of course, I can't do that anymore.
There's just a lot, we were talking about the bartering, you know, like that man brought her the milk, and the Borden's Dairy used to be across from the house next to us, actually where the Shanleys live. That was the carriage house for the church. That's where they parked the carriages. Because that church dates back to like 18-something.
The
And-
Wayside Inn was in front of your house.
Right,
yeah.
the Wayside Inn, but then the church, and then the carriage house for the church was where Shanley's live now. That was actually where they parked the carriages. And I don't know when it was turned into a house, but Kelly, Mary Kelly,
Kelly.
and her husband, and then they had like 8 children, and that would be Jean Depkin, and Lucy, Lily, Aggie, and then boys. They had Sebastian, John. They had like 8 children in that house, and then her husband died, and then Borden's Dairy used to bring her milk. The man from Borden's Dairy used to bring that family the milk from the you know about the dairy, right?
Maybe you could tell us more.
Oh, Borden, but yeah, Borden's Dairy has a mill pond behind it and a waterfall. And they used to cut the ice there and bring the ice up and put it in an ice house with sawdust. And then they put out, my grandfather, Sterling Budd, told me they put out on horse and wagon and took it to Poughkeepsie, where it was loaded on barges and taken down to New York City, ice. So there was no electricity in the town until 1906, I think. And that was generated down by Bull's Head Road there. that bridge that we're replacing was probably built in early, I don't know what the date is, but we needed a new one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was that other big old building that goes around the corner by Byron H where that lady lives?
That was a feed store.
Oh, feed store, okay.
And, yeah, actually, I live in Evelyn Wheeler's house,
Mhm.
which is next to where my mother lived, and her husband was the station master for the trains that ran through Stanfordville, one on each side of the creek.
Yeah, they had three train lines,
Well,
didn't they?
they all met
Yeah.
up here in Bengal. The two that ran on either side of the Wappingers, north and south, and then that one that came in from Connecticut from the east.
Otherwise, was no transportation here. They didn't have the bus or anything.
Well, they know, Mom, that you've seen pictures of people getting dropped off on horse and carriage to go to Huns Lake, which was really going on. Yeah, so they, but,
What else is new?
but I heard they had 6 butchers in Stanfordville before I was born. And that would be Ford Friday, George Bauer, Mr. Churton, and, yeah, your family's Churtons. And then 3 more. So a lot of people...
There were some people that weren't noted as
But a lot
butchers
of
for the
people
deer
bought-
meat, yeah.
No, but, Mom, this was before, because a lady was telling me, a Shelley Hill Road, her name is Ruth Tatch, and she had a name. She lived there with her mother, and her father had tuberculosis. He was in a hospital, and the mother was there alone with the 3 girls, and they used to get their meat delivered. So things were happening in Stanfordville. A lot
In
of
your time, yeah.
Well, before, a lot of services and...
Oh, they said they had, well, it's in the history book too. They have different stores and things here that we didn't have.
Yeah, Mr. Cunningham actually delivered vegetables door to door. He told me, Jim Cunningham and Dot Cunningham. I think
Yeah.
they're both gone now.
Yeah.
Well, where Home Plate was, we bought that property in 1963. We opened, and that was the date that I became town clerk for 64. I said, how am I going to handle all this? I've got this place to do because it was a little food place, the Home Plate Drive-In we called it.
You tell about Mr. Friedenberg though. You ran against him.
Mr. Friedenberg.
I think
yeah.
she ran against him 6 times.
I used to go around knocking on doors every 2 years for 10 years.
Okay.
And that last 10th year, I don't think I'm going to run anymore. And he told me that he was retiring, and that Walter Thorpe was going to be the person to run, and that was my opponent. And I was elected by 7 absentee ballots. It was like touch and go all the way.
Yeah, Mr. Friedenberg, tell him about how he campaigned.
Oh, Mr. Friedenberg, how he campaigned, okay. He used to come around, knock on your door. He had a Hershey bar for me, and he didn't know if I had a dog or a cat, but he had dog bones and catnip. And he said, "What do you have, a dog or a cat?" He was so nice, a nice old man.
Well, sometimes he didn't speak. He just came to your door, you opened the door, and he handed
He
you a
didn't-
Hershey bar, and he walked away.
It didn't even leave anything
He
with
didn't
him.
speak to you. He didn't tell you who he was or what he was doing, but that was the way he campaigned.
Yeah.
And Mom went around and talked to people, but he always won because he was the incumbent. So.
Well, the other thing was that they had the town board meetings in his home, which was, way up on
Well, Market Lane.
Market Lane.
You know where the Friedenberg house was?
It's next to the cemetery.
Yep. And it's
Big
across
old house.
the street from Shapiro.
Mhm.
But
That might have been one of the advantages that I had, because I lived right in town, and I was going to have it in my home, but I said that was one of the things I ran for, that it would be in a public place where people felt, that they could come more comfortably to a
I
meeting.
went to your house to get my marriage license.
oh, I know that. She used to do a hunt. First, you get a hunting license. I always laugh.
Yeah.
But where were the meetings in the public place? Here.
Well, no, they used to have them over at the town barn sometimes in the firehouse.
Okay, so
We didn't have any place. This was the school at that time.
yeah, so you didn't have them in your home, but you did have them in a public
But that
place.
was one of the things I campaigned for. Sign, it was handmade sign. It was just an old thing with
It's a town clerk on it?
town clerk. I had it up in my, because I had a porch. I had it up in my window.
Well, before that, though,
Are they on?
the interacting with the neighbors, I think that was interesting. You had it on?
Mhm.
You had it? Okay. The Gagers, the people that lived across the highway from you,
Yeah.
tell them a little bit about that family.
Well, they were an older couple, and the older man, in his garage, he did chairs, what do you call it?
Caning.
Caning, yeah, he did caning.
Is that the house on 82?
Yeah,
The
that
garage
little
close to the
house.
road?
Yeah, I have that sign, it says chairs caned. It's a little metal sign, but his
They-
wife, their name was Gager,
I don't remember her first name.
Gager.
Mhm.
And their daughter was a nurse, and she lived in the city, but the parents lived up here. And the woman was into vitamins. She was very early into, maybe went to Battle Creek, Michigan, where Kellogg's was. I don't know how long ago that was, but she was into vitamins. And then we had Eugene Gilhooly.
You remember the Gilhooleys? They lived
Did
up
he-
on the hill from where I live. Gilhooly?
He was a
Was he
lawyer.
in the house right across the street?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was a lawyer.
From the church.
Yeah.
But then didn't he end up down on was he on Sisters Hill, or was there somebody up that way that
No.
had the same last name maybe?
No, well, Laura Gilhooly, she was a teacher.
Oh,
Right.
that was
but-
no relation.
Yeah.
No,
it's
but
not-
he and his wife, she was a teacher at Bennett College, and she used to draw for Bride magazine. She was an illustrator. Her name was Kathleen Gilhooly.
Mhm.
And Eugene Francis Xavier
Oh my gosh, I
Gilhooly.
remember.
Eugene F.X. Gilhooly was a lawyer.
They were very nice neighbors, yeah.
Well, we used to go, as kids, we used to go sell subscriptions to magazines. Did you ever do that for school?
Mhm.
And 6 of us used to go over, so he had like 23 years of Better Homes and Gardens, because he would get something from each of us.
Huh.
And then our neighbor, Jean,
Jean Corey. Mhm.
she married Larry Corey. He was Native American,
Which house were they in?
next to the where Shanleys live now. They were really good
Well, that was
neighbors.
Mary Kelly's house. She lived with her mother, yeah.
Yeah, well, Mary,
The other Kelly family, like Tommy Kelly's family, did they live down that way too?
they lived down the hill.
On Church Lane on the left.
And let's see,
They're
Are they like in that little house that has the barn that they kind of read?
yeah, the
just
little
read-
cutout. And that barn is where the jail was.
yeah. Mhm.
That barn that they redid
Yes.
is where the jail
It was a jail. And when they had the parades, I don't know if you have any pictures of the parades. They have the parades coming down Church Lane on July 4th or whatever.
From during World War I, we have those photos.
You have
yes.
those, but you didn't know that that building was a jail?
No, I had
Okay,
no
well,
idea.
it
Nancy
was.
had said that there was a jail in that vicinity,
I don't know,
but I
we-
didn't know which building.
I know when I was little, we had a constable, and it was Mr. Taranti. He didn't really have a police car or anything, but if anything happened, he'd come out and check on it.
Now, did he live in the house next to the market on the corner?
Well, no, first it's where Jean Purdy was, where the post office was.
Okay,
2-story house with apartments upstairs now. Next house was Oscar Withers.
okay.
He had a couple of boys, twins.
And Taranti was
And then
next.
Taranti is
Taranti's
next.
Mhm.
And actually, that house got a little smaller because the gas tank blew up and took off the side of the house. So that's a nice square old federal house now. But
Yep, I remember.
that was
when
about
that
it. And then the
happened.
church down there, Sisters Hill. They had the 2 convents, St. Margaret's and St. Mary's, up on Sisters Hill.
Mhm. Is that still there?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's where they have the
Mhm.
farm,
Mhm.
and the sisters gave the property to the farm.
You know, of course, now I know there's only 2 churches left in town, the Bengal Methodist and the
Right.
Congregational Christian, but they call it United Church of Christ now, yeah. That's true.
So the dates on those buildings, but even the one that Mom lived in, it would be interesting to see what denomination it was. It wasn't Quaker. And the fact that that is the Quaker church, that big old house back there.
Well, it refers to that like that in the history
know,
book,
Mom,
I
but
think. It says
it's-
Quaker.
they-
I know,
Quaker-
it's a meeting house, it's not a church.
But listen, Quakers would not have a chandelier. And what happened is they left,
It's modern.
people left that church and moved into that building. So that building was used as the Quaker meeting.
I see,
But
okay.
not, it's not, definitely not a Quaker meeting.
I know we had heard when we went there that they used to rent that out to people with children and things. I don't know how they ever lived there, you know, because of the
Yeah.
water situation and everything.
What about like, the Grange building and where Mark has Big Rock right now? Like,
People live there, the Darlings.
in the Darlings or in that, at that point. Did you, what about like the apartment building just south of that?
Apartments.
That was, yeah, there was all.
Yeah, that's been broken up to a lot of small apartments now. That was only like about 5 apartments there, but it was always an apartment building.
And Mrs. Wu owned it.
Well, Castellana, we're talking before, Mom.
Oh, I forgot about Castellana.
Right, when I was a kid. Actually, Dion and the Belmonts came to Stanfordville because they knew the people that lived in that apartment house. It was Salvador Gandolfo, his name was, and he had a garbage truck in town. People used to drive around and collect people's garbage. And then Patsy Kelly had a garbage truck, and she actually drove
Yeah.
a garbage truck to pick up people's
I
garbage.
remember that Gandolfo because I think my husband set him up in the business with the garbage truck. It didn't last too long. I think he even drove a bus or something between.
Well,
here.
anyway, he lived there, but he had contacts in the city, and I think he knew Dion and the Belmonts. They came up there, but
What about when you came down Depot Lane, like where, what is it, Pinkham's Hotel, and where Mary Dalton lives now?
this is all like 1947, which was later than when the hotel was there. You know, a family lived in that
It
house.
was, okay, so.
I'm thinking about who
No,
else?
there were no motels or things here at all, except Roseland Ranch.
Right.
See, that even started later. That was in the 70s.
But that was the only, that people came up from the city and enjoyed that.
Okay.
I was up there as a kid, so I was up there, I'm gonna say I was up there in
Yeah.
1960, 61.
We had an interesting story. My grandfather, my grandmother was my father's mother, and she was married and divorced from New York City. And she met a man, Charlie Gigerich, and he was in charge of the salvage of the Normandy that sunk in New York Harbor around 1940s, I think. It was a Navy ship, I think, and it sunk to its deck.
But they had divers.
But he was in charge of the salvage, so he had to go down and go into the ship and bring things out of the ship. And he met my grandmother on the deck of that Normandy. She was selling pastries and coffee in the morning, and she lived. She came here in when she was 20, probably in 1920, and she worked at the Waldorf Astoria, and she lived in New York City. But they met on the deck of this Normandy, and then came up here and had the house on Hicks Lane. That was their first house up
It's
here.
an old farmhouse, yeah, very old.
And then told my parents that they had seen this church and helped them get that. And then my grandparents had the house up where Art and Judy Hoteling live now. And that was a cute little house that my grandfather did some work on. He did a lot of salvage lumber and stuff like that.
They had cabins, didn't
They
they?
had 2 little
Yeah.
cabins that people used to come up from the city and be there for the summer, families. And then they named that Normandy. They had a little plaque outside that said Normandy. It was cute. And then my grandfather built a house next door for a lady named Kit McDonald. Did you know her? My grandfather built that house. And now Art and Judy live there, and they keep it very nice. It's always lovely when you drive by. But the same little gray house. But my grandfather died, I don't know what year, and they had known Sterling and his wife because they lived up Hicks Lane. That's where the farm was. Sterling's wife was Olive, and his daughter was Helen Barrett, and the son was Gordon Budd. And then they have the Budd children.
I'm sure people remember
Yeah,
that.
but anyway, Sterling Budd came over and he sat on my grandmother's couch, took his hat off and put it in his lap, and he'd come up and sit for an hour or 2 at night. And finally he asked her to marry him. And then they had the house on Market Lane across from the school.
Yeah, I understand Sterling built that and when he was 70 years old, of course with the help of his sons, I think, but he was actually up on the roof, I guess.
When he was 90, though, I don't know what year they built McKeogh's. He was up on that roof, and I remember him with Larry Claus up on that roof, building that place. So he was pretty active.
Well, he was in his 90s, I think, when he passed away, but he had arthritis very bad, but Sterling was always out in his garden. The most wonderful melons. Everybody loved those melons. They'd have a lot, and they'd give them to the neighbors. Oh, the other person I knew up there, people might remember on what lane was that where I told you,
Who was the person?
yeah, I'm trying to
No.
remember her name now again.
What did she do?
Yeah. She was taking care of her mother, and Falbasoni.
Oh, that's the one we knew.
Falbasoni, yeah.
It was Louise Weber,
Mm-hmm.
and she lived next to where Sterling lived in the little blue house. I don't know if you know the houses on Market Lane.
You know, pretty much, yeah.
Well, you come up to the four corners and you take a left,
Mhm.
and it's an old, like a farmhouse with a barn on the left. And then the next house would be the little blue house where my grandfather lived with my grandmother. And then across the street is the old school.
Yeah.
But her name was Louise Weber, and she was friends. Her father was Falbasone, I think. And
She took care of them when they were, I guess, until they died.
yeah, they were old, and then she was older.
She had a son,
But
Rudy.
she actually drove, my father was working at IBM in Poughkeepsie, and she drove my mother to the hospital to have me. It was a Sharon hospital. And I don't know how you got there with Connie. I was born in 1951. My sister was born in 1956, and my brother was born in 1949. So,
Well, Rodney Harrison, when I had my first child, Bobby, I woke up about 5:30, and he said, "I haven't had my coffee yet." Anyhow,
yeah,
he was born at
in
10:30, I think.
Poughkeepsie.
Yeah.
But that was my brother's godparents. It was Rodney and, do you remember his wife's name?
Not right offhand.
And they lived on Millis Lane, Mill Lane.
Right down on the bottom on the left.
Yeah, there was a man, Mr. Small, let's see.
O'Malley's had the house to the right, and then they had the house there.
It's that big house. Somebody redid it and took a lot of walls out, and it collapsed, and they rebuilt it. But
Anyhow, he dropped me off at the hospital on their way to IBM to work. They both worked here. That was fun.
That was convenient.
Weird. It was okay.
yeah,
You know.
that was back in the old days when IBM first started.
1949, I think he was born, yeah.
Bobby, yeah. So
Was Bob like in the Lions Club or any, did he join any of the clubs or anything?
Oh,
like
down there?
no, here,
No, here?
Oh,
no.
not the Lions Club. He was a fireman for 10 years.
Was he?
Yeah. I have a picture. I think Nancy gave it to me. And I said, he and Newt Kemp were the only two that were left. All the rest of them were gone.
I think
They're
Irv Burdick was in the picture, but Irv and Newt Kemp and my father, probably early on. And the firehouse was where it was a different building.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a two-story building.
Yep.
Building.
And he was a Boy Scout leader, and let's see, what else did he do?
Well, you did Girl Scouts,
Yeah, yeah.
and then we went to Sunday school.
We weren't
went-
Grangers either.
No,
we didn't.
Camp Medusa.
Never got around to doing that. That's true.
What was Camp Medusa? That's from the church?
Yeah.
They're still going to that
Yeah,
camp.
I think so. Dot Burdick used to go and make the food, and
Yeah.
I think it was a week that you went.
And he was on that library committee, which I think he was kind of
let's
proud
talk
of.
about. You want to talk about the library?
We have a picture of him.
Yeah, this is the original library when I was a teenager. Was the committee was Mr. Butts, and he was, I think, the lawyer Butts' grandfather. I think
Alfred, yeah.
I don't know if I don't think it's his father. I thought the man who invented Scrabble
Pretty sure it's his grandfather.
was Alfred Butts, and I think this is a picture of him, Alfred Butts. And then there's my father, Bob Willis, Alfred Butts, John Battistoni, the supervisor at the time, Minna Lewitton, she was an author, and her husband was Howard Simon, and they were people that were wanting to start a library in Stanford, and Gladys Chamberlain. And they got us teenagers, and Jeff, did he paint the shelves? Or?
I don't know.
No.
Ask them, though.
And this says 1964. And
December
Yep, and
27th, I think. You
So-
want to give it to her?
it was a little later. It was a little building where the pizza place is now, and it was a gas station. Goldie Decker and her husband had a gas station. There were quite a few gas stations in
Yeah, that was an old one, yeah.
Stanfordville. There was
Where Mark Jamond is.
yeah, but who? Billy Allen had that gas station.
Oh, how about the barber? I remember him.
Oh, Al Perry was.
He used to take pictures of people, remember?
You would be a great person for me to give 3 albums to. We have the pictures, the Historical Society, and half of them are unidentified.
Oh yeah, to help with the.
I don't know if I could help you.
And you could.
You have albums.
But that was really, I mean, an unusual barber, I think.
Well,
And then we had the liquor store with the, what was it?
well, before that, it was a grocery store, and it was the Aubrey and Marie Chadwell had a little grocery store there.
Right.
And then they built a building and made a liquor store, but or I had it behind there, I don't know. But that actually burned down, and they rebuilt something.
Is this a newer firehouse? Was it an older
Yeah,
one?
there was a
1965.
there was a
Okay.
two-story firehouse there, but the story about home plate was 1963 again when she first got elected, and my father got a woodcraft garage in pieces, and they put all that together, and it was a cement slab. And the story is that it was an empty lot where the kids used to play baseball over there, and he put the cement slab, which was probably about maybe 20 by 20, I'm not sure how big it was. And the kids went by in a school bus, and they said, "That's no bigger than home plate."
That's what we named
And
it.
he thought that would be a good name, so that's how it got
We were
to
trying
be.
to think of a name for it. It was getting kind of difficult. I
Named
love that
Hoplet.
when he said that, yeah.
So anyway, they opened that in 1963, and it was seasonal ice cream, only open from May till September, Labor Day.
Even September, there was no business, yeah,
But
Labor
I
Day.
meant, that's when it,
It was a short,
from 11 to 7 at night, 11 to 11 at night. So that's a place where community people used to come and hang out and buy ice cream. Place to go.
then he added another part to it for the young people to come and listen to the jukebox. Who was the drummer that used to,
And they call that the club room. That's
Yes.
where we used to.
Yeah. uh-huh.
And then, different people took that over.
Just gonna get some water.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
And it's 50 years, can you believe it? It was
you
in
want to
business.
pause it? No. Yeah.
You're not,
So they were in
You're not
business,
doing
but
did you pause it?
that was it. Churton store. And I heard a little bit about that, how Bob Churton got to be a butcher. And they used to have horses up there. We used to ride our horses up there and ride with them up in the hills. But
how did he become a butcher?
I think he was trained. I don't know anybody in the family that was a butcher before him, and if that was a store before. But I just remember the Churtons living upstairs in the business. We didn't go there that often. We didn't go to Churton's store, did we?
I don't recall.
We went to Bowers because we could walk
Was
down to
close,
George
yeah.
Bowers. Yeah. But we went to school here. This was 5th grade.
Well, what was that? Was that a church, the building that went on the road next to Churton's? That road that went where we used to vote? That used to be a voting
Oh, that
place.
was a Grange. That one down
Oh, a
on
Grange
Millis. That Grange.
They used to have a curtain because they had a place where they served food, and then they had to have a curtain where we went to vote. In that old building.
Was it a church? I thought it was like a Grange.
Because the one building there,
It was never
It
a
was-
church.
it was a Baptist church at one point,
Okay.
and then they moved up to Bangor, because the Catholic church was a Baptist church too.
Was it?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Which
Yeah.
one was first? Which church was built first here?
The first, I don't know which denomination you mean.
Well, I mean, which building?
I think maybe the Baptist church might have been,
And that was the one they just tore down?
no, that one was actually where Millis and 82 come together,
Down
where the
there.
cemetery is. And then it had something to do with the railroad, there was a change, but then the house on Millis Lane was a Baptist church, and then up at the top, there was a split, just like with the Quakers.
Mm-hmm.
And they went up to the other building.
Well, I think somebody bought it and had a home out of it. I don't know
Right.
what's
Well,
there now.
They do now, yeah. Some man that does woodworking or something, I think. has it.
Mm.
That's all different through there. But it was because of the railroad.
What about that big, long building in front of Churton's there? The big, long building?
Oh,
They had
Bullis Hall.
They had Bullis Hall, they had apartments there for a long time, and then somebody bought it and was
I
trying.
heard there was a theater in there at Bullis Hall at one time.
I think, was it Bullis Hall, or was it the one where the Legion was?
No, Bullis Hall.
It was Bullis Hall?
The Legion was the one we're talking about down on Millis.
Well, the Legion also, they were for a time in the one that they tore down across from Churton's. Leroy Campbell Post, I think it was, they used to be in there at one point.
Oh, but you mean the Catholic Church, but then the
Oh, no.
Millis.
Catholic church, then Bullis, and then the next one was, there was the other,
I don't remember that. I
Okay.
remember that was apartments,
yeah,
and Florence Coons lived there,
exactly,
and some other people that we knew. Judy
Yeah.
Coons could tell you.
yeah,
She,
Yeah.
I think maybe that's where she grew up.
she probably did.
Now, I did work for Battistoni's, you know, the restaurant,
Mm-hmm,
Henry and Ethel.
yeah.
I don't know if we had a bank. I think Sissing Bank was fairly new. It wasn't here, I don't think, when we
It
came
was-
here.
Well, Bank of Millbrook.
Yeah, but we didn't have Sissing Bank. It was, yeah,
Mm.
Newton Dual.
New tool, yeah.
Yeah, I remember.